Before about a week ago, I was living in the same two-story house that I had grown up in with my father and my elder brother, Ben. My name is Josh, and I am 28 years old. The reason I didn't leave my father alone 3 years ago was not because I was a slacker, a freeloader, or any other term they love to throw around. Rather, it was because I didn't have the courage to leave him alone after my mother passed away. Who is Ben? In any case, Ben stepped in to assist, which primarily entailed moving back in after his second divorce, taking up my previous bedroom, and allowing me to be the one who was in charge of everything. Everything, including meals, bills, the yard, visits to the hospital, and so on. However, when people talk about being taken for granted, I don't believe they see it being as deliberate as it actually is. It was not neglect, rather, it was disdain, casual brutality veiled in dry sarcasm, and brotherly jokes that hurt just a little bit too hard. While we were arguing, Dad would stand by and do nothing. At other times, he would grin, as if he was pleased with Ben for his ability to keep me in check. On a Thursday evening, as we were eating chicken and rice, everything came to a head. Yesterday, I had just returned home after working a 12-hour shift, meeting inventory deadlines, and conducting budget audits. It was the kind of day that makes your spine feel like rubber and your head buzzes like a wasp nest. I stepped in to find Ben sitting on the couch with his feet up, laughing at something on his phone, and the kitchen was a complete disaster. There was food left out, and the sink was piled high. As usual, my father was sitting in the chair by the window, with a newspaper open but not yet read. To begin, I didn't even utter a single word. I simply began washing the dishes, with steam rising and my hands submerged in the water. I scrubbed, rinsed, and stacked the dishes over and over again. Ben then cried out from the living room, saying, "You're acting like a drama queen by clattering those plates because you're not looking up." Not because of what he said, because he says worse, but because of how casually it ran off his tongue, how normal it was, as if I were a part in a play that he didn't even like. I froze up. I paused for a moment, turned off the water, and then said, "Perhaps if you cleaned up after yourself once in a while," and that was it. Ben snapped, "Here we go, you always find something, always complaining, you only bring drama." I then turned off the water. I went to my father, and I wasn't even searching for support. I was just hoping for a glance, a raised eyebrow, or some acknowledgement. However, he simply put his paper down and remarked, without even blinking, that perhaps we might have peace if you just left. During that particular time, there was no loudness or significance. The quiet was heavy and conclusive, and I nodded, not because I agreed with what was being said, but because something inside of me suddenly turned off, like a switch that I was unaware even existed. There was no shattered dishes, and there was no yelling match. Upon ascending the stairs, I gathered a duffel bag, a laptop, a charger, some toiletries, and 2 different sets of clothes. Instead of leaving a letter or saying goodbye, I simply grabbed my keys, walked out the back door, and drove away. I did not leave a note. What happened to me? To the Airbnb of a former co-worker of mine. At one point, he had offered it to me for a weekend escape, claiming that it had been used very little. After that, I paid him 2 weeks' worth of rent in advance. Cash, no questions asked, need to be hidden away in a place they wouldn't think to search for it. In the event that something were to happen, I banned their phone numbers, switched off my location sharing, and disabled Find My iPhone. I also slept for 3 days straight, and I mean that I genuinely slept. There were no groaning floorboards at 2 in the morning, no disagreements over the temperature settings on the thermostat, and no knocks that were a form of passive aggression when I locked the door to the bathroom. I unblocked their phone numbers by the 4th day, not because I wanted to talk to them, but because I was curious about what would happen with them after that. The communications did, in fact, begin to trickle in the end. Initially, from Ben, "Where are you located?" From your father, "You should mature and stop pouting." Then there was silence once more, until yesterday morning, when I awoke at approximately 9 o'clock, blinking against the lights that were flooding through drapes that I was not familiar with, and I noticed that my phone was buzzing on the nightstand. 17 missed calls, the majority of which were from Dad. There was a couple from Ben, and one from a number that I was not familiar with. Even though there were no voicemails, Ben's SMS message stood out. "Please give me a call. This is very important." The moment I heard it, I was staring at it, trying to determine whether or not to erase it, and I felt myself laughing. A knock, and not the kind that is gently knocking. 3 distinct thuds, followed by a pause, and then 3 additional thuds. I remained motionless on the edge of the bed, my heart beating feverishly. Who could have possibly known that I was present? After that, there was another knock, and then I heard a voice that I had not anticipated hearing again so soon. "I'm sure you're there, Josh. I feel you." When it was Dad, he sounded as like he was running out of breath and possibly even anxious. However, I did not move and I did not speak. The only thing I did was sit there, fix my gaze on the entrance, and wait to hear what he had to say next. Once more he knocked, but this time he was lighter. After then, there was a sudden shuffle, as if he was shifting his weight or perhaps looking about to make sure that no one was observing him. Although his voice was muffled through the door, he said, "Josh. Now, I am aware that things have gotten out of hand. It wasn't that we meant he quit." Took a deep breath out. "So, would you mind opening the door for me? We need to have a conversation." Neither did I move. Even though my hand was hovering over my phone, I did not actually touch it. I felt the pressure of the room's silence pressing down on me. So much so that even the furniture seemed to be holding its breath. While I waited, I listened. "Stop knocking. There will be no more noise." Then, with a slow and heavy step, footsteps could be heard disappearing along the corridor outside. Not with the intention of opening the door, but rather to peek through the peephole, I stood up and moved to the door. The man was there. When I saw my father standing in the courtyard, he appeared to be at a loss for what to do with himself. After giving the door another glance, he reached into the pocket of his coat and pulled out something, which turned out to be his phone. Once he had finished typing something, I observed him put it away and then leave. After a brief pause, my phone began to buzz. "Please just come home. I sent you a text. I beg you, please do not apologize or punctuate." It was only that one statement that provided me with all of the information that I required. I was the reason he was absent. He was missing me. The reason he was here was due of an unfortunate event. I failed to provide a response. Instead, I brewed some coffee and sat down at the teeny-tiny table in the kitchen with my laptop. However, despite the fact that I had job commitments to attend to, an accumulation of emails, and reports to review, I was unable to concentrate, and my thoughts kept going back and forth to the same questions. What had been different? What caused the unexpected crisis? Why is it today? By the time midday rolled around, the answer began to become more and more clear. My supervisor was the first to call me. The fact that he enjoys brief check-ins is not unique. On the other hand, his voice was shortened this time. Apprehensive. "I was wondering if everything was all okay on your end, Josh. It was a strange email that I received from someone who claimed to be your father." I sat up much more upright. "Of what kind is this email?" He was hesitant. "He stated that you were experiencing some kind of crises. That you had abandoned the family in a state of discomfort. It was his request that we put a hold on your direct deposit until you arrived home in a secure manner." I blinked my eyes. "What is it?" Onward, my boss continued. "It has been brought to HR's attention. I thought it would be important for you to know that we did not take any action." I thanked him, then shut up the phone and turned my attention to the wall. It appears that this was the case. There is no regret. And not love. I am not even concerned. It was a matter of damage control. My father had attempted to take away my financial support. Probably made the assumption that I did not have any funds to fall back on, or forgot that I had a second bank account that he was unaware of. If he touched the appropriate buttons, he believed that I would be able to crawl back home. On the other hand, he was incorrect. Totally in error. They had relied on me for assistance, but I had not uttered a single word. Whenever I paid for my father's auto repairs, whenever I paid off Ben's credit card debt, or whenever I paid off the back taxes, nobody wanted to confess that they owed money. What I just did is, in a low voice, I believed that being a family meant being present, regardless of how unappreciative that may have been. But what about this? Trying to exert control over me by using my own money? I was completely unaware that I had crossed a line with it. By the middle of the afternoon, the situation had deteriorated. I received a text message from a number that I do not recognize. A screen capture. This was a post that Ben had made on his Facebook account. Some people take great pleasure in playing the role of the victim and portraying everyone else as the antagonist. If they didn't make every talk feel like a personal attack, perhaps we might still be able to call ourselves a family. Below it, comments from family began to become more and more numerous. Josh has always been the really sensitive person. I just can't believe he got away so quickly. After everything that his father had done for him. This one made me laugh out loud, in the sense that they were aware of what Dad actually did or did not do. After closing the post, I sat there and did nothing. There was no boiling in my blood. There was no quivering in my hands. I experienced something even more distressing. Unfeeling. I am exhausted. It was as if I were watching a movie that I had already seen 10 times and was well familiar with how it concluded. On the other hand, I was not going to fulfill my role this time. As a result, I committed a trivial act. It's easy. It is quiet. It was my cloud drive that I signed into. The one in which I maintained backups of every receipt, every transfer, and every bank statement that demonstrated the number of bills that I had paid for Dad and Ben over the course of the previous 4 years. Each and every mortgage payment. Each and every automobile note. Each and every Venmo. Until the next payment comes around. I'd not lost any of it. This is not due to paranoia. However, because that is the way I am. Yes, I do not forget. I took the files and compressed them into a folder. We labeled it. It's Josh. The parasite for the family. Simply for my own recreation. Following that, I attached it to a fresh email. My gaze was fixed on the field of toot. Only one name was entered. The Aunt Sylvia. On the whole, she was the only member of the family who ever appeared to be able to see through their pretense. Whoever it was that cautioned me during my mother's funeral. Keep an eye on your rear end. A smile that is full of deceit was given to your brothers. I decided to send it. I proceeded to put my phone on silent mode. The night before, I didn't get a lot of sleep. I remained in bed. The city lights were flickering on the ceiling as I watched them. I was curious about the amount of time that would pass before the consequences reached them. There wasn't much time for me to ponder, due to the fact that they appeared once more the following morning. On the other hand, it wasn't only Dad this time. And it was Ben. He was not banging on the door. He was beating loudly. The beating was jarring and unpredictable in its rhythm. As if he were attempting to burst through the door with nothing but his own willpower, he slammed his fists against it. I jolted myself upright. Around my legs, the blanket became knotted. The heart started beating quickly. Taking a look through the peephole was not necessary for me. I was able to identify the beat. None of Ben's actions were ever subtle. His steps marched forward as if they were accusations. The attention was required by his knocks. His voice as well. It's true. It arrived at this time. It's Josh. This man yelled. I beg you, open the door. I am aware that you are present. I chose not to respond. Neither did I move. I simply sat on the edge of the bed and allowed the sounds to settle about me like fog. He had begun to pace now. I could hear the sound of his boots rubbing against the cement that was located outside the space. He would occasionally huff his breath, as if he were having a conversation with himself. I am attempting to muster the bravery to give it another shot. Are you able to find this amusing? He made a yell. Is that the package that you sent to Aunt Sylvia? Is this even possible? Right now, you are making a concerted effort to make us appear terrible. Don't look good. Yes, that was it. That was the full extent of Ben's experience. It is not the truth. It was not what they had done. Only the outward manifestation of it. The illusion crumbling apart. He was slipping his mask. Simply put, he could not tolerate being perceived as the issue. I was always responsible for that. The one who is gloomy. It is the challenging one. The person they could point the finger at if something went wrong. He had made it his expertise to manipulate every circumstance in such a way that he emerged from it looking clean and serene, as if he were merely attempting to assist. While maintaining my silence, I carefully stood up and made my way to the entrance. It was not opened by me, simply by standing behind it. The warmth that emanated from him through the wood was so intense that I could almost feel it. Then he continued, Dad is completely losing his mind. Are you aware of what you've done? Every single person is calling him these days. My Aunt Sil and my Uncle Rick. It was even Grandpa who inquired about the situation. He was humiliated by you. As I heard that, a glimmer of something stirred inside of me. To be ashamed of. He was enraged by that particular thing. It is not the truth. This is not the years of being gaslight. Not the emotional abyss I had to force myself to crawl through in order to keep things afloat. It's only that somebody eventually took notice. There was a dialogue. Finally, I made my voice heard. My tone was soft and unruffled. This is not a lie. He came to a halt and laughed. Do you believe that makes it more favorable? You are hanging up our soiled stuff, right? Dear Josh, that is a betrayal. My jaw was clenched tightly. No. One definition of betrayal is the act of utilizing another person for a period of time, treating them as if they were garbage, and then attempting to close their bank account when they finally leave. There was a pause in the conversation. Afterward, he changed his tone. There is less anger. Even more arrogant. You genuinely believe that you are so significant, don't you? What gives you the idea that the family will just choose your side? If anyone is going to care about it. I chose not to respond. He knocked once more, being more gentle this time. Man, you need to just go outside. Let's have a conversation. I retreated from the entrance and sat down on the edge of the couch with my back to the door. Phone in hand, but there has been no response. I was familiar with his strategy. Bring me to my knees. Try to be sensible. Alter the story in some way. More than enough times, he had done it. The knocking came to an end. It was footsteps that I heard coming back. It was an automobile door that slammed shut. The turning of the engine. It was not quite over, however. Another buzzing sound came from my phone 10 minutes later. The message that was received this time was from Aunt Sylvia. My dear, I have just finished a phone call with your father. The man is irate. Apparently, you are experiencing a breakdown. That you have been unsteady for a number of months. I reminded him that if that were the case, you would not have managed Ben's tax situation, organized his insurance payments, or rectified the leak in his attic. I don't get a single word of what he's saying. Simply checking it out. How are you doing? I remained fixated on that message for a considerable amount of time. That single paragraph ended up being more beneficial to me than any talk I've ever had with my father. I replied with a kind, I am not in danger. Moreover, I have finished playing their game. I am appreciative of your faith in me. In an instant, she responded. At all times. Please let me know if you require the services of a lawyer. However, if they continue to bother you. I am in possession of names. The remaining hours of the day were spent in a haze. I did not check any of my social media accounts. I did not respond to any other texts. Nevertheless, I was able to sense the pandemonium that was occurring out of sight. Relatives sharing a whisper. There is a constant flow of messages back and forth. At long last, the foundation that I had spent years trying to keep together was beginning to show signs of cracking. On top of that, I wasn't the one who fell through. I received a final message towards the end of the day, which caused me to put my phone down and simply gaze at the wall in a state of astonishment. My dad was the one who sent it. All right, Josh, this is enough. You are acting in a cruel manner. You have caused this family to feel ashamed. We will forget about this incident if you come back tonight and apologize for what happened. Nevertheless, if you do not, you should not anticipate being welcomed back again. How are you doing? That was very opulent. To what do you wish to return? Which home was it that I was treated like a piece of furniture? Is this the context in which Ben's problems were my responsibility? When did my suffering become a punchline in the real world? I failed to provide a response. Rather than that, I opened my laptop once more. It was this time that I retrieved the shared document that I had been gradually putting together over the course of the previous year. It was no longer limited to merely receipts. It was a complete log with entries by date. Citations. I was able to vividly recall conversations word for word. A personal history of every kind of manipulation, every kind of jab that was veiled as a joke. At each and every instance, they deceived me into thinking that I was the issue. For what purpose was I putting it aside? I had no idea. At this point, vengeance was no longer an issue. No, not really. It was about witnessing it for the first time, bringing it to light. In spite of the fact that I had been compelled to swallow the truth for many years. Not at all theatrical was I. I was not a self-centered person. Not at all unstable was I. I had just finished up. I had reached my limit of being used as a scapegoat by a family that thrived on silence. Then, just as I was going to close the laptop, I encountered yet another knock on the door. But I didn't find it at my doorstep. At the window, it was located. The window was being traversed by a shadow. I am not pounding. This is not yelling. This is just standing there, looking over. My heart stopped beating, since I was familiar with that silhouette. No, it was not Dad. Ben was not the culprit. Nobody else was responsible for it at all. And someone with whom I had not communicated for nearly 4 years. All of a sudden, everything that I had been under the impression I understood about what was taking place started to fall apart. After a few moments, I was finally able to completely recognize the face that was visible from my window. The porch light cast an amber glow, which caused the shadow to move closer to the light. I felt a shiver travel through my body that had nothing to do with the air conditioning that was running in the evening. That person was Caleb, my cousin. The funeral for my mother was the last time I saw Caleb. He was there. I was comforted by his bare hug. "You do not deserve this," whispered the speaker. And after that, together with the rest of our so-called extended family, they vanished back into the city. When we last spoke, it had been a while. He wasn't the type of person who would follow up with family updates or birthday texts regularly. In spite of this, he had become one of the few people whom I truly respected throughout that period of silence. Due to the fact that he never participated in the family's deceit. He did not act in any way. He took a step back after recognizing things for what it truly was. And suddenly, here he was with us, at the front door of my house. I had not yet finished processing it, and it was like a ghost from a part of me. As I approached the window, I cautiously lifted the blinds to cover it again. Neither of them smiled. It was just a modest wave with a hand extended. I felt as though he was trying to see if I would still acknowledge him. As I opened the door slightly, my voice was strained with a sense of bewilderment. "In this place, what are you doing?" As he exhaled, he felt a sense of relief. "Can I come in, if you don't mind? Just for a moment, please." After some hesitation, I opened the door a little further. Caleb entered the room, appearing to be older and more exhausted than I had recalled. He appeared to have driven without stopping, as evidenced by the fact that he was slightly unkempt. He was still carrying his luggage on one of his shoulders. Hoodie was wrinkled, and the rims of the eyes were tired. I was able to hear what had transpired. He whispered. "A call came from Sylvia. As stated, things went awry. An eyebrow was raised by me. For that, you traveled for a total of 4 hours." He flashed a sardonic smile. "I was informed by her of your location. I mentioned that you could require someone who truly understands it." On the couch, I took a seat here. After dropping his suitcase beside the door, Caleb followed, his voice becoming more subdued as he did so. "At this point, I am not here to instruct you on what to do, or the means by which it can be fixed. You are not seeking for it, I am aware of that. I simply needed to see you with my own eyes. I just needed to. Because I have been in your position before, Josh. I am familiar with the experience of having the people you care about the most convince you that you are the antagonist in your own story." Neither of us spoke. He went on to say, tone low but consistent in tone. "My father used to tell me that I was overly sensitive. When I spoke up, he would twist it in such a way that it appeared as like I was exaggerating my feelings. This includes emotional blackmail, manipulation, and gaslighting. It wasn't just a sporadic occurrence. It was the dynamic within the family. No one else was able to be seen, up till the time that I departed. In addition to that, they claimed that I had abandoned them. We made eye contact. On the other hand, Josh, you did not desert anyone. You managed to get away. Having the courage to carry it out without causing the home to catch fire behind you is commendable. That almost brought me to my knees. My throat became more constricted. The lump that had been sitting there for the entire day was finally swallowed by me. The posture of Caleb was forward-leaning. I was able to view Ben's post. The remarks given. Those things that your father has been saying. They have been terrified. Do you have an understanding of that? Control was lost by them. For me, you were the glue. It is the banker. It is the caregiver. This is the emotional punching bag. When you stopped acting out your part, they became quite anxious. My question is, why do I still get the feeling that I did something wrong? I inquired in a low voice. It's as if I abandoned them to drown. I'm sorry, Caleb grinned, because your body is still recovering. For a number of years, you were conditioned to believe that your existence is synonymous with utility. As a result, you now have the impression that you are being harsh whenever you stop being useful. Nevertheless, Josh, that is not love. It's a form of programming. It wasn't until I felt the substance on my hand that I realized I was crying. In order to retrieve something folded, he reached inside his pocket and took it out. Not a letter. Ahead of my departure from the family for good. He stated that he had written this to himself. Just a warning. I always had something to read whenever I had the need to cave in. Because I want you to have it. I took my time opening it. Only 3 lines there. You do not serve as their servant. They are not using you as a scapegoat. There is no damage to you. For a while after that, we remained silent and sat there. He did not inquire about the specifics. I refrained from prying. Just give me some time to think about it. That was precisely what I required at that moment. When Caleb eventually got up to leave, he grabbed my shoulder and was about to leave. Regardless of what you are going to do next, you can choose to go without contact or you can try to rebuild on your own terms. You are the one who has chosen to do it. Certainly not because you feel guilty about it. I gave a slight nod. I am grateful to you. And he smiled. I made sure to bring you some donuts. I am aware that you consume powdered sugar when you are stressed. However, he did not take them with him. After that, he left without uttering a single word. The following morning, I awoke far before the sun rose. At that moment, the sky was still a pale color, and the globe had not yet begun to hum. A sense of clarity that I hadn't had in years came over me as I stood at the window, prepared myself a cup of coffee, and stared out at the city. After opening my laptop, I proceeded to compose an email to my father. There is no apology. Not a solicitation for peace and harmony. Exactly the truth is. For the family. You, Dad. I was told that I am merely a source of drama. If you were to live your life without me, it would be more serene. As a result, I provided you with precisely what you requested. However, I would like to make it obvious. In no way am I your antagonist. Over the course of many years, I was responsible for paying your bills, managing your paperwork, cleaning up after Ben, and taking in every abuse that you and Ben hurled at me. At a time when most would have fled, I remained. In spite of the fact that it was extremely difficult, I remained because I believed that love required faithfulness. On the other hand, I now understand that remaining was not love. Survival was the goal. Considering that I have ceased bleeding for you, you do not have the right to alter the story. You have no right to call it betrayal when I finally made the decision to go with myself. It is not my fault if you feel humiliated about something. Your reflection in the mirror is what you see there. However, I will not be returning. I will not allow myself to be silenced. I won't do anything to protect your pride by keeping your secrets. In the future, I hope you will take a look around that peaceful residence and realize, distancing oneself from other people is not the path to peace. It is the result of treating them as though they are important. I did not wait for a response from you, Josh. Instead of moving into the modest apartment that I had paid a deposit on a week earlier, I packed up my belongings, locked the Airbnb door behind me, and moved into myself. I had not yet informed anyone, not even Caleb, about it. However, I had been arranging this scenario in the back of my mind for several months, even before that evening where everything came to a head completely. What else is there to say? This place had a strange kind of silence. It was not a heavy item. It did not feel tense. It was a liberating experience. The upstairs was devoid of any footsteps. On every corner, there are no allegations waiting to be made. It's just me, a bed, a desk, and a place to sit in quiet. Even after a few more days had passed, the ripple effect had finally halted. I received updates via text message from my Aunt Sylvia. Ben had chosen to erase his post on Facebook. Not a single person had received a call from Dad. She received messages from a few of her cousins, who were perplexed. Some people took a side. Only a few of them did not. In spite of this, I no longer cared. It wasn't that I was looking for approval. I had previously discovered something more suitable. Without ambiguity. On the following weekend, Caleb made his return. In the same way that we used to do when we were younger, we constructed a tiny bookcase, placed an order for Thai food, and watched a movie. There is no drama. There is no cheating. Nothing more than a link. He then gave me a gentle prod and added, "You know, starting over does not mean that you failed." This occurred as the credits were rolling. All it indicates is that you have finally made the appropriate chapter selection. And I believed it for the very first time in what seemed like years. In other words, I did not return. I do not have their phone numbers unblocked. By releasing them from responsibility, I did not make peace with them. On my own terms, however, I was able to find serenity. After then, I did not turn around.